as much because I mean it depends on the register, but with like high floating notes, um, it helps ring out more. So like it really depends. Like I will play with the reverb settings like as I'm playing. If there's less going on, like. And I gotta get used to like talking or something like this. So this is like a breakdown where there's not much going on, and I will turn down the reverb a little bit. Like if you hear strings coming in, and you want to melt in with that without like covering it up too much. But when you have an intermission like this, it's a great time for a solo. So yeah, let me demonstrate kind of how I play on this. So I've like established it's in G minor, and if you don't have the ear to like kind of recognize a key, you will have to kind of depend on analyzing your tracks or making sure that the right key, or just learn how to kind of play a single note and find that root note that sounds good over whatever's playing. So that piano starting in the background is kind of signaling that the next drop is coming in. So when you're playing the tracks, you want to listen for little markers like that, because that's how producers think. They think in terms of 8 bars, 16 bars. I mean, it's formulaic. It's how a lot of our songs are kind of created. And even like that little... Like that last bar, there'll be a little marker that can like signify the next drop's coming in. And so when you hear that as, an instrumentalist, even if there's like, sometimes there's like vocals or like, like someone speaking, and I don't want to cover that up too much. So maybe I'll just play like what those strings were playing, just like singular notes, like a pad, a pad for the non-producers, kind of just like a single note that can kind of help like fill in some space and create some melodic structure. As an instrumentalist, I'm always looking and like listening for these. And there are certain genres where they just don't have that as much, like tech house, or, even disco sometimes, which people consider, there's a lot of instruments in disco. You got violin in disco all the time. But it's always like some high note held up above. And I'm still trying to figure out kind of like what else is going on here. But, if there's like vocals and stuff going on, so like I could show you kind of how you can like lead into a break, like a drop, just doing something really simple, like increasing the dynamics, creating, what producers call a riser, which is just kind of like a going up sound that's increasing in volume and intensity. And so if you're waiting for a drop like that, then, maybe you didn't get a chance to, maybe they're mixing something in the intermission as well, because that's what a lot of DJs are doing. So for the non-DJs, when DJs are mixing from one track into the next, as an instrumentalist, sometimes you have to just pray that they're doing it in, they're mixing in key, because some DJs don't, and that's okay. I do that sometimes, and I realize I'm stuck in kind of like a certain key range, and I want to break out of it. But depending on what's happening, your ear can start getting confused when you're like, wait, something else is coming in, but it's a different key. So maybe you just want to wait. And so you're waiting, and you're going to drop into that next drop, and that drop is probably where they're going to maybe cut out the bass or kick of the track you were just on, and turn on the next one. But if you're waiting for a drop, then playing, so maybe you're playing in the intermission, but if you're not and you want to play on top of the drop, then what are you doing when there's like a kick and there's so much else going on? This is where I kind of lean into less is more, and paying attention to how instruments are used on tracks will give you a lot of insight, because a lot of them are just synths being programmed by producers, and they're not necessarily thinking about creating a solo out of like every instrument they're using. But if you learn, like, there will be times for solos, kind of like that intermission I just played, but also sometimes then you want to fit in how a producer would kind of use your instrument, and that's to just kind of follow whatever chords are going on in the bass, and maybe like riffing, or if there's a melodic element that comes in like every like 4 bars or something, doing like a call and response can be kind of cool with that too. So it's not much instrumental. So I can kind of So what I did there was kind of pick up on what some of the other melodic elements were playing, like da 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 da. You can kind of hear that like in the intermission. So you can bring in stuff like that and have like the audience kind of like perk up and recognize that, because they're like, oh wait, I heard that before, but now it's the violinist playing that. And that's often when they're like, dude, like, is this your track? I'm like, no, like I'm improvising on top of a track. Sometimes, with DJs, I don't even know what the track is. And as a DJ, it can be really hard. It's all a question of trust, especially when you haven't played with a DJ before. And I've had this happen several times. They don't know like how much you can sit back, whether, you can kind of play off the melodic elements like that. They don't want another thing to like start worrying about. So the better that you can fit in naturally with the track and show that, that trust can be kind of established instantly, when someone sees you play with something and know, okay, he knows how to sit back. He's not going to be kind of taking up all the space for himself. And when I play with DJs, it's, I consider myself a guest on their set, which is, I'm always really grateful for, but that's why I started playing my own DJ sets, because I also wanted to, create and curate and also work closely with DJs that know my style, know how I sit in, and can place that trust in me, and we don't have to talk about it. But even so, like before I ended there, like as you're hearing the like track going, this is kind of in the last like 32 bars of the track. So certain elements are going to start fading out. This is a house track, so house track is very formulaic. Go ahead.
So if you're kind of like curating your own tracks and also accompanying with the violin, are you intentionally picking like certain tracks to distinct for me, or you just kind of wing it as you go? When I'm
DJing and playing on top of it, or just DJing?
When you're DJing and playing on top of it.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely something that's really important. Is mixing in key. And so what that means is, if you're picking a track that's like C major, its related key is A minor. And so, people not as familiar with music theory will have, uh, and I'm blanking, like the scale wheel, like the key. Yeah. Yeah. The Camelot wheel is like, yeah, I've seen that. That's used a lot, with producers to know kind of what keys fall in what.
Open key. What's it called? Open key.
I'm thinking of just the circle of fifths because I'm classically minded. That's how I learned, like all the different major keys. But yeah, that's definitely something that I try to do because it gives you more leeway. A lot of the tracks I play with are melodic or instrumentals, or might have instrumentals like till the end of the track. So you can't necessarily mix in something that's in a different key because it's going to start clashing. So what you can do is bring in less melodic elements, like the hi-hats, for example, or kind of more percussive elements that allow you to kind of keep like the instrumental going as you're mixing into the next track. Now, obviously, if the next track's in the same key, then that makes it a lot easier. You can, bring in the bass as you still have the instrumentals going on. The only tricky thing is if the other track also has instrumentals, and you don't like it. It can be really cool sometimes. So I really I enjoy the way I mix. I think because it's to some people it might be a little rudimentary. I don't really focus on effects or creating complicated drop downs or switching between different tracks because I'm doing a lot more. I tend to let tracks play out. Whereas a lot of DJs will maybe get bored after the first breakdown and transition out because if they're not doing anything else, the second half is going to sound a little repetitive. But as with an instrument, you can change that. You can play the whole track out and make the second half completely different from the first half and keep it interesting. So when I played with DJs, I've had to I will notice, it really depends. If I'm not as familiar and I'm just a guest on their set, I'll let them mix how they want. But I will notice if they're mixing constantly track after track, there might not be that many intermission breakdowns for you to play on because they're normally already thinking, all right, I'm going to start mixing in the next track. And you can use two options. You got either say, hey, let this track play out and I'm going to play right here. And you can mix out here. And if you have the DJ knowledge, it's kind of easy to communicate like that. Or you kind of learn how to play, after the drop happens, playing kind of like how I did, where you're kind of picking and choosing your moments. Even when there's you play right here. So there'll still be little moments like that for you to play on. But yeah, for the most part, I try to mix in key. Just makes it a lot easier. And when you have stuff that's in key, you can start thinking of yourself kind of as an orchestra conductor, where maybe a certain solo is really nice to loop, and you can keep that going while you get the next track, and it's just the drums and percussion. But maybe you can kind of go back and forth with the instrumental that you're looping, or keep the instrumental looping while the beginning of the next track is a little boring or something like that. Yeah.
You mentioned just now finding little pieces to play over and thinking about there's an intermission or the spot would sound good for a place to picking where you want to insert your instrument. I feel like that kind of stuff occurs to me when I'm listening to songs, but I'm curious about how you, and I've seen your sets, and great, how you take that and expand it to 2 hours of performance, right? Thinking about how am I gonna when something is occurring to you in little maybe 4-bar phrases, how do you go from that to all right, here's how I'm gonna fill up 2 hours of space.
Well, so I'm not really planning it out the whole time like that. I'm almost kind of in a flow state where I'm reacting to every track coming, and that's just a style that some if you tend to maybe not prepare as much or just go off the fly and learn on the fly like that, it's just going to happen a lot more often. And and that is where a lot of practice at home will come into play, because it's very hard to get into a flow state if you're still thinking too much. It's almost like when you're learning to drive a car and you have to still think about like pressing each pedal and like, driving stick or whatever. The whole point is to have one or both skills, whether it's playing an instrument or DJing, be automatic enough that like, okay, I can turn my brain off with the mixing and focus on this, or I have to turn my brain off with this and start focusing on like mixing in the next track. And it'll go back and forth, like I tend to, depending on like the vibe or energy of the set, if you're building it up, the chiller tracks might have like a lot more space. If you're playing, or if I'm playing a multi-genre set, say like I'm going from like house music into breaks or into a track that's 120. So I love it. Yeah, this is Bob. This is an amazing Taylor's mixing in different tracks. You have a lot more space in between each hit. Like in between. And then, his violin starts coming in. And like, obviously knowing your tracks is like really important, because I didn't even like think of like when I just, like his violin's about to come in, so you can kind of fade out there. But yeah, I don't plan out, kind of what I'm going to play. What I will notice though, is when I'm mixing in key and say I'm playing a lot of tracks that are in A major or A minor, as an instrumentalist, especially with improv, it feels like a never-ending learning process for me. I mean, if I had to like really put someone like something up as my standard, playing with like really nice jazz cats makes me feel like I can't play my instrument at all. Because they can really take like almost any key or any progression and they practice their riffs or that flow of creativity from like, what note am I going to play next? I still struggle over that. I revert back into kind of like just familiar riffs or familiar arpeggios. Or, I mean, if you're starting to improvise, you're really just learning how to play the root note, or, go up the scale and say, am I playing in the right key? Does it sound right if I'm just playing just the scale or just parts of the scale? But yeah, sorry, I totally forgot. What was the beginning of your question?
No, you
okay, cool. That was one of those things where I just started tangenting. Oh yeah. So I was gonna say, like, to get out of that, when I notice like playing the same riff can be really cool on like different tracks, but say it's like the fourth track you played in A minor, and you're like, okay, like I'm starting to kind of rely on the same things. Then I will try to think of like, how else have I not used my instrument yet? Whether it's just plucking or even just like, yeah.
Just making sure, just give me like a 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay.
So we have to start.
Oh shit! It's 9:13.
I mean, you can finish out. I just want to make sure you can do that demo, but if not, like you can keep going. Like,
okay, awesome.
You can be done by like 9:25.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll wrap it up now. Cool. Well, I don't know if I covered everything I wanted to, but I think I covered a lot. And I kind of will just turn it over for questions now. Like any kind of questions. Yeah.
So I think a couple other tracks you played like all had string instruments in sections. I'm curious, do you like intentionally select songs that have string instruments? Does that help?
I do. Yeah, I do. I look for it because I think it helps give, like, I mean, I know a lot of genres, say progressive house, for example, will have a lot of like kind of strings, but I'm looking to kind of have something like the strings will already put a familiar element in the listener's heads. And it makes it very easy for me to kind of play on top of because I recognize the instrument, I recognize easily kind of what notes they're playing, as opposed to maybe like a synth or a horn or something. And it's very unique to just kind of like what I want to play. I want to lean on stuff that's feels authentic from my background, and so that's my orchestral background and my ethnic background. So I like playing a lot of stuff with instrumentals, but a lot of the stuff with instrumentals right now can be like Afro house, can be a lot of melodic house music that really pulls from like Middle Eastern and South African and Latin American influences. But the producers can kind of still all look the same. So I look for, sometimes like tracks that are that just speak to me as like something that I feel like can be authentically me. And it's, as someone that isn't really like producing or, has this like a huge original library yet, it's important for me to find tracks that feel authentically like me, while giving credit, obviously to the wonderful artists that made this music, but considering myself and the live elements I weave into, like, this is like what I would make, like, that kind of thing. So that's just particular to me. If you're a horn, playing with kind of like funky house, or if you're, a bass music fan, like stuff like Grizz, can be really cool to like kind of like riff off of that. But yeah. I mean, it was a little bit of like an intentional choice. I definitely like have like a library of tracks that have instruments that fit well, and then weirder stuff that I can just enjoy DJing, and I don't play over top of every track, especially if I'm mixing in and out. That's also the less is more thing. Is having violin on every single track isn't something I want to do. It's something that I first like was like, because I'm excited. You just want to play the whole time, but it can be kind of tiring. Like you want to kind of like let like the set itself breathe. Even when you're looking at like a band performance or like a smaller band playing on stage, they don't have like solos every single track. They kind of rotate it through. So I try to think of kind of DJing the same way, especially with instruments. Just that this is like a digital band, and how can I let different elements shine while sliding myself in there and not overpowering, either the track or the whole set. Yeah. Yep.
Probably depends, but what would you say are generally the best places or sites to hear the music when you're playing? I played with anyone and I couldn't hear very well because I was really loud to myself.
Yeah.
Like, what are your tips for being able to not only hear yourself but hear the DJ as well?
Yeah. So it is an investment, but in-ear monitors can be really useful. It's kind of like a wireless pack that you would run into some output out of the mixer, but it would allow you to being pushed out of the master or what everyone else is hearing in your own ears. And with the right front of house, they can also isolate your line as well, so you're also hearing yourself higher, better. I don't even have that. It definitely is like an investment I should make, but oftentimes when you're trying to plug into a DJ mixer, I'm still not exactly sure where I would go. What I've done in the past was, if there's multiple headphone inputs in the mixer and you're standing right next to the DJ, you can plug in some headphones with them, like a 1/4-inch output and then a 3/8 inch output, and so you can plug in there and you'll hear kind of what the DJ's hearing. Obviously, it'll have to be turned to master so you can hear everything. Otherwise, you're only going to hear the track that they're maybe queuing up. And cue means like they're just listening to it in their headphones. It's not being played yet. So that, like, I'll also have a balance of, if I'm playing like an acoustic electric instrument like this and I'm hearing myself like a lot, I'll use the electric violin. And as long as I can hear myself like in the overall mix, whether it's in the, booth monitors or the stage speakers, I'll rely on that. But I will say, like, it's, I feel like a lot of this has been ear training. And even then, I don't get it right. Like, I'll think I'm in tune and then listen to a video clip afterwards. And, like, depending on how good your ear is, like, 95% of people will not be able to tell if you're, like, 2 cents off tune. But to me, I hear it as a classical violinist. It just, like, grinds my gears. So, some sort of, like, in-ear setup might be really useful. But yeah, that's the best advice I can have is, like, if you have kind of like just a small setup like this, plug headphones in here, like an earbud or something, and then you can keep an earbud in while you're playing. Now that'll obviously be limited by how long like the headphone length is. When I was playing with like multi-effects like guitar board, it had a headphone output. So normally like the other music would be overpowering and I could barely hear myself. So I would run that like headphone output there. You can also get like headphone extension cords and stuff, but it's a little bit of a bootleg setup. But again, a lot of DJ shows and environments are very bootleg. So you work with what you have. If it's just a mixer on stage like this, I don't even know if this would work actually. But if there's like no booth monitors, you could maybe run out like the booth monitor out, into something that you could plug headphones in. I'm not sure if that would work. I don't see why not. But yeah. Did that answer your question a little bit? Sometimes you can't avoid it. And you'll just have to kind of like take your pause, listen, know what key it's in, and then pick and choose your moments. So you can play with confidence because you know kind of what's going on, but you don't have to like listen for it. You just might have to like take breaks. Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you for expressing how DJs releasing their freestyling with another DJ. It's good to just know a basic format of how it's track is played.
Yeah.
How these certain tracks play. It's usually the same type of format. So,
yeah.
Also communicating with the DJ and having like a safe word or a wink or something, it always helps with that being a conductor and having to be
I'm just wrapping up questions.
I just want to say thank you for expressing that. That's been a major thing is, people not the people playing the instrument aren't prepared for the cues or aren't prepared for the drops, and they overwhelm the track.
Yeah.
And or mixing, you don't know when you're mixing because some DJs are transitioning the song. You can't tell that it's for next track over. So it's really good to like make sure you're checking with them, make sure you're getting eye contact with the DJ, and making sure you have those safe words or something.
Yeah. I talked about that a little bit earlier, but thank you for bringing that up again. I posted a story of me and Shango playing earlier at a house party a couple of weeks back, and we had never played before. That said, we've been around each other a lot, but this is a house party, so low pressure. No one's in the room, but even then, as I'm playing, like I'm looking at this clip, and Shango's looking at me to know like when we're in the middle of a transition. He's looped the first half of the first 4 beats of the new track, and we're just kind of like playing out the other track. It's not like, like a drop had probably just happened and you started queuing up like the looping part. But that's where like I'm listening and hearing like, okay, a transition's happening. And I wouldn't normally be playing over a transition when I start like hearing it. because you might recognize like a key change or something. But sometimes, you know, a DJ will either get stuck in a transition or you'll be recognizing they're waiting for you to finish playing and to kind of end it out some way, you know? So that's just what we did, you know? Like I recognized, oh, okay, you know, he's like transitioning right now. He's watching for me to finish playing. And once I finish playing, then he can kind of like bring that filter up and bring in the next track. And that's just musical knowledge, you know, from the DJ side, but also very just music. It's all music, you know, we're all musicians, you know, whatever you're playing digitally or you know, with your hands. So yeah, you know, hopefully, you know, as people start DJing, we have open decks open up, maybe we can like kind of demo more live playing. I know I didn't really do much because I was mostly talking, but thank you guys so much for being here. Hopefully everyone got like a little bit of something. Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much. Just pictures.
Absolutely. Hey, I didn't see you. Yes. Thank you. Absolutely.